Hello and welcome back for another episode of B2B Unplugged. I'm Dan Bassett, founder of Brandtel, and I am joined today by Nick Finnemore. Hi, Nick.
Hi Dan, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How's things?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, I can't complain. Quite
Good.
busy, having to sort of contextualize between different things. But that's the fun about what we do as consultants, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm jumping straight into it. It's interesting the people that I speak to that are sort of doing, I guess, similar things to what we do in terms of like consulting with different businesses. Actually, they're still really busy after the budget. I think a lot of people are, you know, is this going to affect business or not or whatever? But actually, people there's still lots of projects going on. There's still lots of things happening, which is really positive to hear. So
Yeah, without a shadow. I think that the positive thing, the one thing that's inevitable is change, and I think you're right. I think with technology, with government, new government, I think there's I think there's an element of excitement. I think there's lots of change and lots of things that can be going should be going on. So good.
yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get into sort of the nitty gritty, do you want to introduce yourself for the benefit of the audience? Tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll kick off from there.
Yeah, sure. Oh man, so I'm old. That helps. So I've been in the education sector or EdTech sector for well over 20 odd years. Um, education is really important to me. If I'm, it's quite interesting because when I was at school, I didn't really. It wasn't really. I've got dyslexia, so I never really did very well. I didn't get any. Even my GCSEs, I didn't get very many GCSEs. I got physical education, strangely, and things like that. But I didn't actually get very many grades, mainly because it just didn't quite work for me. And I learned other skills later on in life. But then the first product I had when I was at Sims, so I worked at Sims for 18 odd years. And one of the first products I sort of ran was the one which was about attendance, and my attendance was appalling. So it was quite an insightful sort of. It was almost like um, it was like my that I got hold of attendance because had poor attendance when I was younger. It's almost that sort of thing. But yeah, then so education really is really important to me. I think ultimately we need to be supporting learners. I'm a massive big fan of individualized learning, and so we can definitely talk about that if we want to talk about AI and stuff and where I
Mhm.
think the market needs to go. But yeah, so I worked in Capita Sims for 18 years. Went up to sort of headed up the product management team, looked after the FE, HE, as well as the schools, sort of giving the sort of strategic direction. And I left there in 2018. Started a consultation business with my wife. So Sarah and I both have worked in the education sector for both of us been in it for 20 odd years. And now we support companies who are looking really to either enter into the education space or how they can grow and develop their solutions and also develop their sort of sales and marketing strategies as well.
Mm. And it's an interesting space, the education one, because quite often they get the I guess the bulk, not necessarily the bulk, but they get a decent portion of the sort of budgets that come from governments and stuff. So I think the perception always is that there's loads of money in the education sector. I think you and I know from our experience that that's not always necessarily true. But as a result of that, I think there's lots of innovation and there's lots of really interesting things that are happening in the sector. They're not always the quickest to adopt new technology, but they're always pretty good at once they've figured out what the technology can do for them, of sort of finding really interesting ways of putting that into practice. So what are you seeing from a technology perspective? You're a technologist. What are you seeing within the edtech sector at the moment in terms of trends?
Yeah, I think everything you said is right. I think it's interesting because if you look at them as businesses, then mats and schools are lots of them are multi-million pound businesses. And and you're right. A big chunk of that money is spent on staff, and rightly so. Um, but that means companies need to come in and show that they basically, that schools or mats should be utilising because they can create efficiencies or they can create cost savings in one way or another. And so, in some ways, that's where I think you're right. That innovation comes in it's really important, because if you can't demonstrate those things, or you can't demonstrate how you're going to help children meet their fullest potential, then schools rightly should ignore you. Ultimately, if you're not meeting their goals, then why would they buy you? So I think actually innovation is really important. I think from a technology perspective, I think AI, without a shadow of a doubt, is exceedingly. I think it's exciting. I think there's lots of opportunity out there. I think it is going to drive a lot of efficiencies through automation. I think the idea of creating greater levels of insight by bringing that data together, from a data science perspective, I think is really, really important. If it was my vision, I'd probably go, there's so much to do, but I think, we're all going to have to basically take small chunks. I think, ultimately in the future, I think all data should be open. I think there should be an element of, the child persisting across their full education. And it doesn't matter if it's social care interacting with them, if it's health, if it's schools, if it's education, wherever it might be. Ultimately we need to get to the point where all that information is informing us exactly where that child is. I don't think we're anywhere near that. And it also scares a lot of people as well, which I do fully understand. But
completely.
I think AI is good.
Open data, I think, when you talk about it within the realm of education, is always going to get people going, no. And rightly so. Like, obviously, protecting children is the first job of education. So, that makes perfect sense. But I think you're right. There are ways to do that mean that it's not, it's not really open. Blockchain technology or something like that might be a way of doing it that means that education organizations can get the insight that they need without it being sort of at risk to third parties or cyber threats or something like that. So are you seeing anything, but anybody sort of from a sort of early technology perspective look at some of those problems and you think actually that's a really interesting way of looking at it?
Yeah, so I think there's some small, like I said, the bite-sized chunks. So I think first of all, there's lots of companies like, I know Bromcom are, and I know Arbor are, but they're sort of embracing the sort of generative AI. So that's cool. Probably at different stages. There's companies that are basically just wrapping ChatGPT around their solution and then saying, oh, we've got AI, which is true. They have got AI. then there's others that are a bit more, they're working out exactly how they utilize AI to create those efficiencies. So there's always, do you want the badge of we are AI, or do you want, actually this is this is what we're doing for you. These are the benefits, and this is what the value proposition is for this particular solution. By the way, we're using AI to get to that, and I think that's obviously the most, that's exactly where companies need to get to. They need to work out what AI can do, then make sure there has a practical benefit or value to the customer, and then develop it to meet that. And and if we want to take away the sort of the way that people are scared about AI, we are going to have to build our own, large language models, because that's how we're going to protect, kids, because we basically can then make sure that, the data that's being provided is more secure, but also at the same time, we don't have some of the other wider internet influences that we probably don't we don't want kids or teachers to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bang on. Actually, in fact, like the problem of badging AI is something that I've spoken to lots of sort of businesses about. Yeah, you can definitely say we use AI, we're an AI-led company or whatever, but it doesn't really mean anything unless you're doing something unique. Like you say, if you're just rebadging ChatGPT or another LLM, then actually is it actually adding value? I don't think that it probably is, generally speaking. In some cases, it's probably making your product worse if you're just rebadging ChatGPT because you're not properly testing or whatever. Not saying that people would do that, but it runs that risk. But it's interesting you say about education having the need, I suppose, to make its own LLM platform and and use that to drive the insights and stuff. And I guess the problem with that is, I don't disagree with you, but I think the problem with that is that will require quite a lot of investment. is that investment there at the moment in the UK education sector outside of government? Is there private investment coming in, to that level that's going to be able to supply that? I suppose. I don't know. I mean, you're closer to that world, I think, than I am, but
there is a lot of private equity, lots of investment in education. Do you know I know we talked about, from a school perspective and a MAP perspective, obviously funding, they're quite price sensitive. There's an element where, they feel the pinch, and all those things I fully understand. But there still is a massive drive of investment coming into education because it's quite a safe market in the sense of it always grows about 3% every year. There's an element where, if you can get a footprint into the education sector, it's easy then to potentially sell additional services or products as well. So investment into the education sector is still quite strong. We've got at the moment, I'd say most of the big ones, most of the big companies are probably backed by, Iris are backed by HG. You've got, Juniper backed by Horizon. You've got the Key, which is backed as well. I can't remember the name. I know Ian Armitage is part of it, but there's Lot and Sims. Itself has got parent pay, but it's backed also an element of it backed by Montague still. So there's lots of money access. Again, backed by private equity. So there's lots and lots of investment going on, which is great. It means that, people should be, quite feeling, strong about the fact that basically they can develop solutions, and that basically lots of investment companies still feel there is growth to happen. Mm-hmm. So that's great. But I do think, to recognize that growth, I think sometimes it's a little bit hard, but also you have to come out with solutions which are differentiate. And going back to the MIS market, I'm not sure we differentiate enough at the moment. I think, that market feels a little bit like a commoditized market, even though everyone knows it's a baseline. And I think some of that differentiation will come from AI creating some of those automated processes and sort of speeding up and creating efficiencies and reducing down costs. As an example, why are we still using CTF files? Why are we still using ATF files? Why is there such a manual intervention when it comes to census? All these things cost, and they cost a lot of money, for government, for, schools, for, local authorities. So you start looking at, if you looked at the whole ecosystem, you can go, there's a lot of cost savings to be made. And actually, that's a lot of money that could go back into children and making sure that they basically, can fulfill their potential. There was a report the other day just about Send, and Send has been billions pumped into it, but there's no differences that have been made. And that's because of the systems. If I'm being honest, a lot of the systems are not very strong. But there's also because of those systems, not only have they pumped a lot of money in, if you looked at how much, you're talking billions of pounds, where parents are basically, are basically appealing and winning, and that's because the systems aren't strong enough. So I know some of this is, human and business processes, at a higher level, but a lot of it is also inefficiencies in systems. So I think AI can come in, and again, that money, and we're talking billions, can go back into the education of children and supporting them.
Absolutely. I don't think it's even just AI. I think sometimes it's just having somebody who looks at the problem differently. And I saw this directly when when I worked at IMP. Will and Dave very much saw the problem of budget management in a very different way to the rest of the market. And because of that, from a marketing perspective, it's a dream, because you're like, right, well, that's our point of differentiation. It's already there. All we need to do now is just make sure that we cement on that, we build a brand around that, and then we just keep providing great customer service to those customers. And I think the education market is one which they're extremely loyal to providers, providing those providers actually give them value. They tend to be very hot on that. So I think AI, whilst I agree, I think it is going to change the world at some point. Not necessarily now. We're at the very early stages of really understanding it. I think actually, if you just have some good founders who just understand the problem really well and innovate and do something different, sometimes that can provide so much value that, like you say, schools can then say, right, well, we've got freed up money or whatever, or we didn't understand that we were wasting money here or whatever, and we can pump that back into education and give it to kids, which is what ultimately us as taxpayers want to happen. So.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's interesting because there's so many companies that we talk to where they basically the technologies come first, and they go on, oh look, we built this amazing, beautiful looking system from a tech perspective, and you go, great. Anyway, got any customers? No. But we love this. We love this product, and you go, yeah, you do, because you basically created it. It's your baby. What Will's done, and the Imp guys have done, basically is they focused on the customer first, and that's if you're talking to any business, you would go, you need to understand who your target audience is. You need to work out what where their pain is, and then build a solution around their pain. And if you whatever technology you use, that's because it's the most efficient way to solve that pain. It's not because you're using the technology for technology's sake. You're basically going, this is the pain, this is the best way of solving that pain in the most efficient way, and that's where the value is going to be. And you're right, they did exactly that. Dave and Will definitely have gone down that approach. Everything about delighting their customers is exactly that. The idea of going from a map perspective first, because they knew that was their target audience. For one reason or another, they definitely built an amazing business based on being customer centric.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of somebody who was inside that business for a long time, this bang like it's everything within every single element of that business. It's what does the customer think? How do we know? How can we validate this? And it's so true, and it's something that a lot of businesses get wrong. They think, like you say, they think about the products, they think about the solution, and then the customer's an afterthought. And it's like, well, actually, the customer needs to come first, because they will tell you if what you're building is right or not, because they use it. And that's it's a fundamental thing that it frustrates me as a marketer that a lot of marketers don't get. They don't go back to that point and say, well, actually, what's the customer saying and what are we building? That informs the way that you go to market, I think. I think they've definitely done a great job there. I think the market's moving towards them, hopefully. So yeah, definitely. Looking forward from a education perspective, from a sort of EdTech sector perspective, if you're starting a business now from a technology point of view, what would be your focus areas? Where would you think are outside of we've just spoke about people first, thinking about your customers? From a technology perspective, what do you think you would focus on? Would you focus on the AI problem first and sort of really finding that point of differentiation, or do you think the sector's not ready for it?
No, I think I'm probably going to sound a little bit like a broken record in the sense of I think it goes back to going back to the customer first. I think that if I was going to, I think what I would do is because I think this is where I think sometimes actually there is a disconnect. So I think educators and the reason why education is behind the technology curve a little bit. If you looked at finance and fintech and loads of other markets, they're embracing AI, and I mean in a big way. They're spending a lot of money. They understand the potential efficiencies and that it can create. I think we're a bit slower, but that's not because of educators themselves, because I think they're innovative. I think they're really busy. Ed teachers are always innovative in the classroom. That's what they have to be. They've got children that are of different sort of abilities, so they're having to work out what to do with that lesson, for those kids. But understandably, from a technological perspective, a number of teachers don't have time to think about what technology can do. And I think there's this disconnect where I think the companies and EdTech companies aren't talking enough. So, I would be, if I was starting a new business, I wasn't sure what it's going to look like or shape of it at the moment, I'd probably go and speak to a bunch of educators and sort of go, right, if I want to be in the classroom, tell me, where's your biggest pain point? What don't you understand about these children? What do you understand about these children? If there was something I could do to basically make your life and take away pain, like maybe marking or whatever it might be, what would that look like? How would you be delighted? How would you then look at life and go, wow, my life is far better. I love this job even more because ultimately this bit of pain has gone away. That 3 a.m. pain point. And so that's where I'd start. And then I would start looking and going, right, how can I solve that problem from a technological perspective? And I do think AI can, solve a lot more problems than we were used to, in the sense of, because that's what it does. It's basically, AI is going to be as big as, when we first found out the internet. So that's how much I'm bought into AI, I think. But then we need to go back to the educators and say, we can solve this by doing X, Y, and Z. When they go, whoa, 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 there's security issues, isn't there? Or X, Y, and Z. Then we have to reassure them and say, no, we know there are potential, pitfalls, but we're going to solve those problems. Be confident of us, because we're the ones who can find the solutions. You're the ones with the pain. And then you just keep them on board and keep them close to you. And then you prove that basically they can trust the new technology. And at that moment, for me, I think there's still too much of a disconnect where educators aren't forcing, and I mean forcing the providers and going, I've got this other pain, I think you can solve it. Tell me how you're going to solve it. So basically pushing them. And then I think there's the other side, which is us in EdTech aren't going enough going, tell me your pain now. I'm not going to tell you what technology we're using. I want to understand your pain, and then I'm going to come back to you. So I think if I was going to start a business now, I'd start with the customer again, understand the pain, work out what is the best solution. Sometimes that might even be a service rather than technology. But how do I solve that problem in the way that basically creates the least amount of friction for that customer, because they're busy? And then I think you've got a proposition which then you can obviously market, sell, and all that sort of stuff. But keep them on board, all the way through. Make sure that they're advocates of what you're doing. They basically believe in the value that you're delivering, and that's probably where I would, in a simplistic way, that's what I would do.
100%. I think you bang on. Like, keeping customers central to that sort of feedback loop is really, really powerful when you do it really well. I think one of the big problems that potentially from a frontline education perspective is that, especially technology as an industry, is seen. Big tech is seen as the problem often to some of the issues in the world. You only have to look at the issues with Facebook and leaking data, and the issues with sort of Russian interference in elections and stuff. It's always put on technology companies. It's always, oh, big tech did this or whatever else. So we have a bit of a bad rap as a result. And I think where you have teachers and it's their first instinct is to protect children and to provide safeguarding measures and stuff like that, they're always going to fall back to, but tech did this wrong before, so why can we trust you now? I think that would always be the thing that I think from a looking at it from a perspective of a brand person, I would look at it as, well, how can I solve that problem? How can I communicate to that audience that actually that's not an issue and that we're going to solve that more than anybody else? What do you think to that? Do you think that's an area of concern or an area that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it comes back to that, them being confident. That I think there's two potential problems, so or challenges that need to be addressed. One is, you're right, new technology. All I see is Facebook is taking all our data, or X is taking our data, or whatever it might be, or Y or Z, whatever you want to call them. So they're basically, they're all taking our data, and they're basically manipulating that data and ultimately manipulating us. And so, that worries me. The fact is, government already has a shed load of data on you. There is, the fact that basically these companies have got data, or they're collecting the data. The fact is they've got, lots of your data has already been harvested, you could argue. And you need to make sure that they feel comfortable about how you're going to use it. So do I think EdTech needs to promote more about, and maybe this needs to come from BISA, BISA basically saying technology is amazing. And actually, I know there's a lot of data being utilized, but that's for the benefit of children, in the sense that we can shape and basically inform and create insights and all those things. And none of it's being used for bad purposes. Maybe there needs to be a bit more marketing around that. The other side is also, as new technology comes in, there's that protectionism, which I fully understand. If I was a teacher, I probably would be going, wait a minute, is AI going to take over my job? And obviously, that is not going to be the case. But again, there is an element of comforting people and going, do you know what this is actually going to provide you is enabling you to again, take away the horrible bits of your role and actually and enhance the bits that you love. So for me, I do think that AI at some point will do things like this child learns better in this particular style. We will get all the data and be able to go, here we go, we're going down to this personalized learning, sort of approach. And there will be, I don't know if you've seen ChatGPT 4. At the moment, there's this piece where this child is sitting there with their dad and he's learning about Pythagoras. And so there will be some elements of learning, because it will depend on the learning style of the child, which will be done by AI. There will be other children who will go, this doesn't work for me. So all it will be is that teachers will be able to, utilize this different technology to meet the styles of the child. And that's right, because it's about the child. Yeah, we want the child to be a lifelong learner. And if we want them to be that, then we need to get them to understand how they receive education, or how they receive being educated. And I think that's where I can, first of all, sort of augment the sort of, this is how you can be taught, and actually we're learning from that, and we understand your style. So here's some content. Maybe in maths you do it via AI, but in English, actually your learning style is much better with having a teacher to talk to you about the meaning and what that passage meant, and how does it feel, and more emotive stuff. So I think we have to embrace technology for all the different purposes, but ultimately, fundamentally, from my perspective, it's about getting to the point where children, whoever you are, you almost have this individualized learning plan, which suits you best. And that also includes blended learning, where sometimes for certain subjects you might be better to learn at home, sometimes it's better to go in school. But we need the sort of more flexible approach to education, I think. And I think AI can support that.
Yeah, I mean, that would be fantastic. I mean, just speaking from experience, as somebody that I don't learn very well from a theoretical perspective. Sitting in a classroom with somebody just talking at me is my worst nightmare. But if I can play with something, or watch a video or something like that, then I'm much better. So I think there's definitely some room for development there if technology can support helping teachers understand better neurodiversity issues and differences and things like that, or different learning disabilities that some that are obviously severe and others that aren't as severe, and they can stay in mainstream education, but they need some slight tweaks. That I think would be fantastic, and I think would be welcomed by a lot of people in the education sector. My sister is a teacher. And I know that she's not in it for the money. She's in it because she's passionate about education and teaching, whatever else. But if she can spend more time teaching and having an impact, and less time, doing the admin and making that type of thing, then fantastic. That would be great. That would be great for her. I think that would be a win for everybody. So
I always paint this sort of picture that and this is with automated cars, and it feels like it's the future, but it's not. It's all about as a person. You basically wake up in the morning, the shower's at the right temperature because it knows who's going into the shower. You basically have the right food because of the different nutrients that you need. Because of maybe the way you went to the loo, whatever it might be.
yeah.
And then you get into a car and it's automated. Then you start asking questions of which class I've got next. Is form FB or whatever, or 8B? Yes. Did they do their homework last night? They did. What are their scores? It was these scores. Okay, excellent. Oh, by the way, yes, Alexa, or whatever it is. There's this child that you may want to talk to, because ultimately I think they found it a little more difficult than the rest. So they might need a bit more attention. Great, thank you for that. There's this other child that basically, they didn't attend yesterday, and actually, if you look, they haven't attended every Monday for every other month or whatever it might be. Why is that? Well, we know also that they go to see their dad on the Sunday, so there might be a reason that they just find it hard to get into school. Okay, need to go and talk to them. Okay, I'll remember that. I'll go and speak to Eddie about that, or whatever it might be. And you start getting to and how we've got the lesson plan. Yeah, the lesson plan is this. Did you add such and such into it? Yes, I did. And you start talking about this, so you basically got this almost like this PA sort of person giving all this information. And then you go, okay, so how far away are we? It feels like very futuristic. No, it's all here. It's just not connected. You can already get toilets that basically diagnose you. You can already get showers that do that. You've already got automated cars. They're using them really heavily in Massachusetts, in America. You've already got Alexa. You've already got generative AI. All these things are there. They're all there. But what we haven't done is brought them together to meet the needs of teachers. And that's the bit we need to do. And it's quite an interesting when you see people go, oh, I didn't realise.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about it like that, but you're right. There's a lot of that type of technology that already exists, and a lot of those data points that already exist. And if you had, like you say, like a teacher AI or something like that that gave them a thing every lesson that says you need to focus on these 3 students on this subject, go over this thing again because 60% of the class didn't get it or something like that, then I think that would be groundbreaking for education. And I think if tested well and worked really, really well, I think it could be something that we could see in the future, 100%.
There you go, Dan. It's your new business.
I'm going to go away and work on that one. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your time, Nick. It's been really, really interesting to get your perspective on education and AI and sort of all of the challenges that we potentially, hopefully, can solve in the future. Really appreciate you coming on. And thank you very much.
No worries. It's been fun. Thanks, Dan, for inviting me.
Cheers.